Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating legal battle in the UK that asks a huge question. Who exactly gets to judge the Prime Minister? We're talking about a powerful rulebook, a determined union, and a court case that really tests the limits of power in Britain.
So this is the question at the heart of it all. What happens when the most powerful person in government is accused of breaking their own rules? Who holds them to account? Is it up to the courts to step in, or is this something that should only be handled in the world of politics? This is precisely what the UK's High Court had to figure out.
And at the center of this entire story is one single document. It's meant to be the moral compass for everyone in the UK government, the Ministerial Code.
You can think of this as the government's own internal rulebook. Now, it's not a law that was passed by Parliament, but it is the ethical standard that every single minister is expected to live up to. It's basically the benchmark for how they should behave.
And here is the part that really matters. The code isn't just about, avoiding conflicts of interest. It goes much deeper. It's about upholding these core principles of public service. It explicitly calls for things like integrity and honesty. And those two words are right at the center of this whole legal fight.
So what happens when a minister is accused of breaking this code, and the Prime Minister, who's in charge of enforcing it, seems to do nothing? Well, that's exactly what one group claimed happened, and it kicked off a major legal showdown.
The challenge came from a pretty unexpected place, the FDA union. These are the folks who represent the UK's senior civil servants, and they're a politically neutral group, but they were so worried about what they saw as slipping standards in government that they decided to do something pretty drastic: take the Prime Minister to court.
So they launched what's known as a judicial review. It's a legal process that basically lets courts check the decisions made by public bodies. In this case, they were asking a judge to look at how the Prime Minister was handling the Ministerial Code, a move that really put his authority on the microscope.
And this wasn't just some run-of-the-mill legal case. It was a huge constitutional clash. You had the union on one side, fighting for the rule of law, and on the other, the government defending the Prime Minister's absolute authority. The stage was set for a real showdown with big implications for British politics.
So it really boils down to this one core conflict. The union's argument was pretty simple. Nobody is above the law. But the government's defense was just as clear. This is about politics, and the courts have absolutely no business getting involved. The judge had to decide who was right.
Now, the union's case was really compelling. They said, look, the Prime Minister's job as the enforcer of the code is a public power. It's done on behalf of the public. So the public's courts should be able to review it. They warned that if the courts couldn't step in, you'd end up with this sort of black hole of accountability right at the top of government.
But the government's counter-argument was just as strong. They insisted the code isn't a law, it's a constitutional instrument. What does that mean? Well, think of it this way. A law is a rule everyone has to follow. The government argued the code is more like a set of guidelines for a specific political job. And if you break it, the consequences should be political, not legal. They said having a judge rule on it would completely mess up the separation of power.
Okay, so with both sides making their case, the High Court had a massive decision to make. Whatever it ruled was going to set a huge precedent for the relationship between the government and the courts for years to come.
So, after all the legal arguments and intense debate, the moment of truth. Who was going to win this epic battle? The union or the Prime Minister?
And the verdict? It was a decisive win for the Prime Minister. The judge was crystal clear, declaring that the PM is the ultimate arbiter of the Ministerial Code and that his decisions on it simply can't be challenged in court. In other words, the courts have no power here.
The judge's reasoning was basically this. The Ministerial Code is a political document through and through, so any accountability for it has to be political too. That means it's up to Parliament, the media, and at the end of the day, the voters to hold ministers accountable, not the courts.
Okay, so what are the big takeaways from all this? This ruling has some pretty major implications for how government is held to account in the UK. Let's break down what you really need to know.
Right? Here are the three key things. First, the Prime Minister's power over their ministers has been totally confirmed. They, and they alone, get to be the judge and jury on the code. Second, the courts have sent a very clear signal. They are going to stay out of what they see as political fights. And third, and this is the big one, if you want to hold ministers to the code, you've got to use political pressure, because the legal route is now closed.
And that leaves us with this final, thought-provoking question, doesn't it? If the person who gets to judge the rules is also one of the most powerful players in the game, what does that really mean for fairness? This court case might have settled the legal question for now, but it's really opened up a much bigger debate about whether the political system itself is working as it should.